Shalom, shalom, Hebrew family. I am Priest Banyaalah, joined by my reader, Yaradan. A lot of inquisitions have been made and questions have been raised regarding this subject called grace. And I'll add in there mercy and charity. So we thought it befitting to enter into a discussion around this biblical term used quite often through what many call the New Covenant. We're going to pick it up in Hebrews, the 10th chapter, and we're going to start at the 28th verse regarding the subject of grace.
Hebrews chapter 10, verse 28. He that despised Moses' law died without mercy under 2 or 3 witnesses.
Now we have here a contrast of covenant, a Moses covenant. He who despised Moses' covenant, that 6th covenant from the beginning of covenants, he died as a mandate in the statutes under 2 or 3 witnesses. He who broke it and was recidivist and just wouldn't do right, they would bludgeon him to death, or he would die a horrific death of burning and torture, dismemberment. And so now he's looking at and examining a covenant. What is he contrasting this covenant to? Let's continue.
Verse 29. Of how much sore punishment suppose ye shall he be thought worthy who hath trodden under foot the Son of the Most High?
He who hath trodden underfoot the works of the Son of the Most High, Yahushua, Yeshua, Jesus Christ or some. So he's contrasting Moses' covenant with the 7th covenant, which is actually David's covenant, sanctified, consecrated, put into effect by the sprinkling of the blood of the Messiah, Yahushua. So look at what we had, the contrast of 2 covenants. Let's continue on.
And account the blood of the covenant, wherewith he was sanctified, an unholy thing.
Who counted the blood, the sprinkling, the activating of that 7th covenant, the very last covenant, he considered it an unholy thing. So now we got the contrast of 1, Moses' covenant, against David's covenant, put into effect by Christ, the Messiah, Yahushua. What is he going to call that last and 7th covenant? Continue.
And hath done despite unto the Spirit of grace.
And has done spite unto the Spirit of grace. And has spitefully misused the Spirit of grace from the Heavenly Father, who have given us benevolently that 7th covenant. Grace is that 7th covenant, that last covenant, the new covenant that you didn't work for. You wasn't righteous enough to go and achieve it on your own merits. The Heavenly Father looked down upon us in our poor and ridiculous situation, and because of the strength of the promise made to Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses, he came back and said, I will fulfill that promise. Not because your children are righteous or because they're good, they're quite the opposite. But because the Father was gracious with us, he said, here is a new and living way to worship and to serve the Heavenly Father. Grace, brothers and sisters, is none other than the 7th covenant, the new covenant that the Father graciously gave unto us. Many people in different cultures or different beliefs, different religions, they believe it is the free and unmerited favor of God. God allowed you to get that job. He was gracious. God allowed you to get well. He was gracious. Those are perfunctory things, and you would never get the understanding of what the Heavenly Father is talking about if you apply grace in that manner. Grace is the unmerited, unwarranted covenant that came to the children of Israel that will allow us to get out of that situation that we find ourselves in. Let's go to 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, the 12th chapter. In the 7th verse. So grace is unmerited favor. It is only unmerited favor from the Heavenly Father upon us by way of that 7th covenant. It's not those mediocre things that you might think. Like I said before, you got approved for a car, you got approved for a house or whatever, you got a new apartment. The Father's filled with grace. That's not what it's talking about. It is purely that new covenant that he gave us. And in the new covenant, you get your own country. You get your own kings and princes and priests, not those minor things. We become one with the Heavenly Father. Let's pick up 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7.
Unless I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations. There was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me.
So now Paul now is coming. He's talking to the church of Corinth. He's saying, I had all knowledge and had all power and I was growing, but there was always a challenge in my life. And that challenge could be anything. Not talking about Paul, but talking about us. It could be addictions. It could be drugs. It could be whatever. There's always something there to challenge you with. Let's continue.
Lest I should be exalted above measure. Verse 8. For this thing I besought the Lord thrice, and it might be departed from me.
Paul looked up and said, Lord, please take this burden from me. I'm addicted to drugs. I'm addicted to womenizing. I'm addicted to being a harlot or a whoremonger or whatever it may be. Lord, please take this from me. And what did the Lord tell him?
2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 9. And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee.
The Lord responded to Paul, Paul, what you arguing about? What you complaining about? My covenant that I graciously gave you is sufficient, brother. Handle that drug addiction. Handle that womanizing. Handle that crack addiction, that alcoholism. Handle those anger issues by the contents of that new covenant given to you by grace. Everything that's wrong with us can be mitigated. Everything that's wrong with us can be quelled, washed away, and changed in that new covenant that the Heavenly Father has given us. Our Father, He created us. He knows us. He knows every component that is defective in us and our strengths within us. And so He give us a covenant that's more applicable to us in the times that we're living in so that we can better ourselves and build ourselves and get back to that righteous high calling of the Heavenly Father. Let's continue on.
And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness.
My strength is made perfect when you are weak. When you are weak, you can utilize the components inside the new covenant to build yourself up and to make yourself strong. The Father have given us the tools to make ourselves better. But if you're going around thinking, grace here, I got that apartment. Yeah, grace, my welfare came in. Grace of G. You lost it already. The Heavenly Father's on bigger things, better things, greater things. We got a nation that has crumbled and died and that is rotting away in a casket. We need to be quickened, resurrected, and made alive. And we can only do it by the graciously given covenant of the Heavenly Father bestowed upon us. Let's continue.
Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in mine infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me.
So he said, I would rather then, knowing this, that I have to battle in this world utilizing the components of my new covenant, I'll glory in that, knowing that I am being made stronger and being made better by the equipment and the weapons that the Heavenly Father have given us to fight these battles. Let's drop that and get 1 Peter 4:7. So once again, brothers and sisters, we're finding out that grace is more than some of the mediocrity that has been preached to us, that it is just the unmerited favor of love that gets you nowhere. Yeah, that sounds poetic. It might get you a little misty-eyed, but it means absolutely nothing to your greatness and your character building and your strength. 1 Peter 4, verse 7.
But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober, and watch unto prayer.
Look what the great elder Peter said. He said, the end of the world is at hand. Everything is coming to an end. So be you sober. This is not talking about the absence of alcohol. He's talking about being sober in mind. Don't be double minded. When an alcoholic, when someone is inebriated, they're seeing two. When you're sober, you can see focus, you see one. So don't be double minded. Don't be dipping into this and dipping into that. The end of the world is near. You need to be watchful and you need to be constant in the prayers in which the Heavenly Father allowed us to attain to in this new covenant. Let's continue.
Verse 8. And above all things.
But above all things, here's the chief thing you need to do.
Have fervent charity among yourselves.
Among yourselves, assemble yourselves. Interact with this new covenant that the Father has charitably given unto us. Everything else is weak. Everything else will amount to nothing. When the end indeed come, you will be judged on your interactions between that new covenant. We talked about it in the volume, the 7 covenants, beginning with Adam, going on to Noah, and 20 generations from Adam came Abraham. The covenant was established with Isaac, then Jacob. And after Jacob, Moses received the covenant. And after Moses, this is 6th covenant. The Father graciously and benevolently, altruistically gave that covenant to David. And that covenant sat there for a moment because there was no one worthy to sprinkle the blood on it until the Messiah, the Prince, Yeshua, Jesus Christ came. And he sprinkled his blood on it, igniting a new and living way to worship the Heavenly Father and to atone for trespasses and to remove sin and to become one with our Heavenly Father, making peace, all entailed in our great, glorious covenant. Let's finish that up.
For charity shall cover the multitude of sins.
That lets you know, once again, emphatically, that this is a new covenant. In the new covenant, you have the ability to cover a multitude of sins. That evil in which you have gotten into, you can bring it away. You can take it away. You can dismiss it. You can eat it up. You can burn it up and become a new person. Let's read on.
1 Peter chapter 4, verse 9. Use hospitality one to another without grudging. As every man hath received the gift, even so minister the same one to another.
As every man have received that free gift from the Most High. Charity is not about how you are going about giving to others, even though we are commanded to do that. It is focused on what the Father gave to us charitably, that new covenant. So even as the Father hath given upon us that new and great way, you behave the same with your brethren. All right, let's continue.
As good stewards of the manifold grace of the Most High.
He now calls charity grace. Grace and charity is the exact same thing. The Father charitably gave you the new covenant. The Father graciously gave you the new covenant. And once again, I'll include mercy in there. The Father was merciful upon you to give you the new covenant. We have grace, charity, and mercy. All of them are the exact same thing. You can go off on a poetic tangent and call it something else, but you'll be doing your own thing. This Bible was written by Hebrews, for the advancement of Hebrews. And now we have been given these glorious words of truth to free ourselves and liberate ourselves in these latter days. Let's go to 1 Corinthians, the 13th chapter, and we're going to pick it up at the very first verse. This is showing you how incredibly important receiving the charity of the Most High, which is the new covenant that the Heavenly Father charitably gave us, and then acting in it. 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1.
Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I am become as sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal.
He says here, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels, I could be in Moses' covenant and understand how to speak in many dialects. And if I have not the new covenant that the Father graciously gave me, I sound like an old school xylophone, a little kid banging on stuff and cans and pots and pans. It's nothing. Got no rhythm to it. Got no soul to it. Got no purpose to it. It becomes nothing. Let's continue.
Verse 2. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I can remove mountains.
He's saying here, I can be a masterful spiritual tactician in Abraham's covenant, rocking it, understanding the beginning, the middle, and the end of time. And I speak in tongues of angels where I was conversing. If I haven't received this 7th covenant charitably given unto me by the Heavenly Father, who am I?
I am nothing.
I am nothing. Worthless. My life is nothing. The Father tells us that wisdom is more moving than any emotion. We can't get fixated on one covenant. Let's get fixated on Noah's covenant. We will still be here waiting on an ark. That has come and gone. Move on with the time. We can't be stuck on Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob, or even Moses. Now, that's not saying you receive a covenant and you diss the others. All of these covenants are part and parcel of a whole piece. They're like Legos. They go together. They only increase. So the components that was valid in one increases to another, but they might be applied a little different. You got to notice the subtle change that happens. Let's continue.
1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 3. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor.
Surely this is charity. You go out on the street and you see the poor and you say, hey, let's engage in charity. Let's give my food to the poor. What else?
And though I give my body to be burned.
And if I give my body and I go and work my job and give my 100% check to poor people, that's my whole life. I have no purpose but to help them out. Surely that's charity. That's a non-profit organization. Read.
And have not charity?
I thought that was charity. Charity is not about what you're doing to others, even though we're commanded to do those things. Paul is putting a great emphasis on, we're talking about the charity of the Most High. And if you haven't received that seventh covenant and you're doing all this good, a lot of people say that too. He ain't never do nothing bad. He going to heaven. Wrong. You don't receive the charity of the Most High, embrace it, embellish it, and work therein. What are you? Let's continue on.
And have not charity, it profits me nothing.
It profits you nothing. Brothers and sisters, let's walk circumspect. Let's know what we're in. And let's focus on what we have been given and make the best of it within our time. If we look at the successions of covenant, these men stood strong. And they could not care less about the world that they was living in. Matter of fact, they confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims in the world, meaning I don't belong here. And while I'm here, let me just activate the covenant that the Lord has given us. We must be the same as well. This is not our home. This is not our place of abode. We're simply traveling through here until the Heavenly Father change the whole paradigm and bring heaven on earth by way of that new covenant that he charitably gave unto us. Let's continue.
1 Corinthians chapter 13, verse 4. Charity suffereth long, and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether there be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part.
Now, these are the components of this new covenant. These are the tenets found inside the new covenant. It doesn't behave itself unseemly. It seeketh not her own. The components are the members of this new covenant. They are their brother's keeper. These are the characteristics of one who is in the covenant charitably given unto them. They began to be charitable to their own brethren, families and sisters and neighbors and brethren. He goes on to say that if there be anything else, those things fail, but the seventh covenant would never fail. We knew in part. We knew when Adam had his covenant that there was more to come. Those who understand prophecies, all the way down to Moses. Moses himself spoke about another will come, and he will be a king and a priest. He will be like Melchizedek. Hear you him. He's going to bring the perfection. He's going to bring the completion. All seven coming together, just like you have 7 days. The seventh month is a high holy day, heavy in that month. Or the seventh year is a Sabbath year. Or 7 years times 7 is the Jubilee year. It goes on and on and on. The Father works with these components of 7. This is a completion here. Our covenant. Let's continue.
Verse 10. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things.
Brothers and sisters, now's the time for us to put away childish things, our mediocre understanding, the lack of comprehension. The end of all days is at hand. And it is critically important that we understand the covenant in which we're in and the tenets that are applicable to us within our times. Our Father is gracious, our Father is merciful, and our Father is filled with abundant charity. Let us open up our minds and our heart and receive the gift that the Father has bestowed upon us. Peace and blessings. Shalom.